Time. Season 3 is here. Are you tuning in? Every Sunday is Sitting Down Sundays with the Final Boss. Get ready for an inspiring journey as we dive deep into the transformation from the nation's capital to the entertainment capital of the world. This is the conversation that will ignite your dreams and fuel your ambitions. What you'll experience: game-changing insights from industry leaders, real talk about making impossible dreams possible, the blueprint for leveling up your life, motivation that hits different. This isn't just another podcast episode. This is your wake-up call to greatness. Don't just listen, absorb, don't just hear. Transform, don't just dream, execute. Drop a like in the comments if you're ready to level up with us.
Welcome to Sunday night edition of Sitting Down with the Final Boss. Sitting down with the Final Boss, right? Whew. Man, listen, I got a great show for you tonight. I have a great show for you tonight. Man, this is going to be episode number 181 on our way to 200. Look, everyone out there, man, I appreciate each and every last single one of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of the Final Boss podcast, Final Boss community, Final Boss nation. Man, we're all on this journey together. And listen, my lips are chapped. Listen, good people. Listen. One, ignore the noise. Ignore the noise and the distractions. They're testing your resolve. They are testing your resolve, right? Because they want to know, where exactly does your moral dilemma rise, right? Or lies, I should say. Yeah. Ignore it, right? Ignore all of that, man. It's just noise and distractions. Ignore all of it, right? So, with that being said, look, like, share, subscribe, like, share. I hope everyone's doing man, listen, I hope everyone is doing amazing on this wonderful, frigid Sunday, right? Because it is cold. It is super cold, right? Whoo, boy, man, it's cold. So, I don't remember it. It hadn't been this cold since the blizzard of the 80s, man, if I could remember correctly. But look, we got a great show, right? Java Juice is hitting, right? Hey, to the wonderful Andre. Hey, where's Shakandi? Hey, Goris, what's going on? Welcome. And to everybody else that's out there that's now joining us. Thank you for being here. Look, thank you. I can't thank you enough. All right. So we have episode number 181 on our way to episode number 200, right? And tonight we're going to spin off a little bit of what we just talked about from episode 180, right? From episode 180. So 180, we talked about the you guys, right? We talked about you guys, and we talked about the elements of the show, but most importantly, we talked about you, right? And what it means to be a part of the Final Boss Nation, Final Boss podcast, and Final Boss community, right? So that's what we did. But tonight we're going to elaborate on that. We're going to talk about why I am the architect of insight. The architect of insights. But I'm giving you guys the blueprint, right? I'm giving you the blueprint on how to operate on a multi-platform. This is the blueprint for a multi-platform, right? So, to each and every last single one of you, whether you're watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Kick, Instagram, or for your listening pleasures on Spotify. I know I missed one of those in there, man, but thank you for each and every single one of you for joining us and joining right now. You're at the right place. Don't go nowhere. You're at the right place, right? Because we're all final bosses at the end of the day, right? So, look, right? Man, number one, what's good, right? Think about that. Think about the statement of what's good, right? And when it is said, when what's good is said, how is it implied? Or what does it imply, right? Well, tonight, we're going to get into that, right? Because Final Boss community, I am the Final Boss. And guess what? I am the host of the Final Boss podcast, and we're building the Final Boss Nation, Final Boss community right here, right here. And you're tuning in to Sitting Down Sundays, episode number 181. And we're 19 episodes away from episode 200 and closing out of season 3, The Reckoning, and stepping into season 4, right? Get it? Season 4 is the rebirth, right? We're stepping into the rebirth at episode number 201. But tonight at 9 p.m. live, this is where we are. We're having a conversation that's been brewing for months. We're talking about 350,000 of you across every platform have been watching something extraordinary unfold. You've been watching a combat veteran, walk away from 23 years of federal service and to build 5 weekly shows while running an IT company, right? While completing my MBA and prepping for my doctoral work. But here's what most people don't understand about what we're witnessing, right? I'm just not a podcaster. I'm not. You can't put me in a category of just that. I'm not just a podcaster. I'm not just building a media platform, right? I am the architect of insight, right? And tonight, I'm revealing exactly what that means, including the failures nobody talks about, the systems that almost broke me, and the one decision that changed everything, right? So let's get ready and get into it. Let's get into it, right? But before we go deep, man, I have to set the tone for the night. I have to set the energy before the evening. I have to let you guys know that we're all here about to get on board the Fired Up train on a Sunday night. It is Sitting Down Sundays. The Fired Up train is in the building. Let's go, because go time, right? Go time is out now. Go time is out. Go time is out now, right? Go time out now. All aboard the Fired Up train. Go get it. It's my motivation workbook. It's my motivation workbook. It's the first of a series of 3, right? Maybe more. But right now, it's the first of a series of 3. Go time, all aboard the Fired Up train, where all books are sold. Go pick it up. Go get your copy, right? It would change your life. I guarantee it would change your life, where all books are sold. Go time, all aboard the Fired Up train, written by yours truly, Dwight Turbo Dillon, right? All right, now we got that out the way. So, setting the tone for the evening. Setting the tone for the evening. To my smarts, to my critical thinkers who refuse to surface level content, right? You're here for the doctoral level research on Merger Wednesdays and the cybersecurity deep dives on Tech Tuesdays. For my final bosses, the empire builders executing at the highest level. You're here for the systematic methodology of, and not just for motivation, right? And to my warriors, the battle-tested individuals who understand real sacrifice, veterans who was first responders, right? Who's been through fire, right? Those are the 4. Did I miss anybody? Oh, the motivators, right? The motivators, the coaches and leaders transforming others. You're here to refuel so you can pour into other people. Each of you came here for different reasons, but you've stayed because you recognize architecture, not just content, right? Now, let's build, right? So let's begin. So a little bit I mention this often because it's add context. It's a part of the story. It's a part of my IP. September 11, 2001, I'm at the Pentagon. I'm a fiber optic technician, right? Now, let me tell you what that actually means. I was building the architecture of communication infrastructure, designing how information flows, how systems connect under pressure. That day, that day, that day, I watched the infrastructure hold when everything else fell apart. The communication systems we built kept functioning when chaos tried to destroy them. And I realized something fundamental in that, man. Architecture survives what chaos destroys. That's why the pyramids are still here, right? That's why the pyramids are still here. Now, fast forward, Afghanistan, Operation Enduring Freedom 6, and our Operation Iraqi Freedom 2007 to 2008. Dual theater combat deployments. Here's what those deployments taught me about building anything that lasts. The units that survived weren't the ones with the most motivation. They were the ones with the best systems, the clearest architecture, the most repeatable processes, that function when everything went sideways, right? 23 years of federal service, IT at the branch as a branch chief, right? For Joint Force Headquarters, Army Air, right? I was designing infrastructures, right? Building protective systems. But in 2024, I made a decision that shocked everyone who knew me. I stepped away. From it all, right? Now, not because I was burned out, not because I failed, but because I recognized that the same systematic thinking that builds communication, test. Here we go. Where we are? Where we at? Ah, I caught it. Thank you. I caught it. Hey, Chelsea, what's going on? All right. Let's go. All right. But where was I? I think I'm saying something about not being burnt out. Yeah, not being burnt out, right? And it wasn't because I failed, but because I recognized that there was a level of patterns and systematic thinking that I understood when it comes to communication networks, right? And those communication networks and wins and combat zones could build something even more powerful, right? And that thing that I recognized was that intellectual infrastructure that transforms human consciousness, right? I didn't become an architect. I've always been one, right? I just shifted from what I was building, like many of you do today, right? You may be building on something and you make a shift, you make a change, and you start building something else. Guess what? You, my friends, are a builder. You are an architect. You too may be an architect of insight, right? You can't be the architect of insight because that is moi. I am the architect of insight, but you can be an architect of insight, right? Now, right. So let me tell you about failure. Right? Ah, man, year one. Year one of the podcast. Right? Man, I was overtasked with a lot of business, a lot of thoughts, a lot of planning, a lot of building, but those buildings and things that I'm working on had no foundation, right? They had no foundation, right? And after spinning the wheel so many times, you start to understand the patterns, right? And in that, I thought I was winning. I thought that what I was doing meant instantaneous success, right? I thought diversification was the strategy, right? Listen, I was dead wrong. I was dead wrong. I was working 80 hours a week. I was going to school full time. I was trying to run a podcast, and I had numerous other taskings that I was working on simultaneously, right? Each one of those was only getting 20% of my energy, right? None of them were getting 100%. And then you need 100% to dominate, right? And the podcast, it was suffering inconsistently with terrible quality, right? But I didn't know, right? I didn't know. Listen, I missed episodes. There was no real clear direction. I was creating content, not architecting anything, right? And then I had a conversation with a mentor who asked me one question that changed everything, right? And they asked me, what are you building that your daughter can inherit, right? And I couldn't answer. I couldn't answer him at the moment. Hey, what was I going to leave for her from me being a branch chief, right? What was I going to leave for her for anything that I saw that I was moving for selfish tones of either instant gratification or for the path of money, right? Because I wanted more money, right? That's not sustainable. That's not sustainable, right? Because scattered effort doesn't create legacy. Multiple mediocre businesses don't build empire. Content without architecture disappears. So I made the hardest decision of my entrepreneurial life, right? I scaled down and focused on building substance, right? And from that, I decided that several revenue streams at the time were not as important as building legacy and a foundation. And here's what happened, right? Everything got better, right? Everything got better. Sat Diginet became my foundation. The podcast became my legacy architecture. The clarity created momentum. But let me be brutally honest with you, right? Those first 6 months after shutting everything down, I questioned myself every single day. Every single day. I had family members telling me, you're crazy, man. You're crazy, right? I had colleagues say I was throwing away opportunities. But let me tell you, right? Let me tell you this. Because the architect of insight doesn't build by addition. The architect of insight builds by strategic subtraction, right? That failure, that the scattering of energy across too many ventures taught me the most important lesson. You cannot architect empire while managing distraction. Woo-hoo! Man, those are bars if I'd never heard them before, man. Those are bars. I'm going to read that. Listen, let me give you that bars. Let me give you those bars again, right? Let me give you those bars again. You cannot architect empire while managing distraction, right? So after I scaled down, right, and got clarity, I designed eventually, right? Didn't start off with 5 shows. I started off with 2 shows. 2 shows became 3 shows. 3 shows became 4 shows. 4 shows became 5 shows, right? I designed the 5-show architecture. But I want to give you the actual behind the scenes system, not just the descriptions, right? So we touched on this a little bit on Thursday, on Special Guest Thursday. We touched on this a little bit, right? So let me go into it a little deeper, right? So Mondays, which is Motivation Mondays, I record Motivation Mondays. Instead of starting the week for the podcast on Sunday, like tonight is actually the last day of the week for the podcast. I start with Monday, right? And the reason why I don't start on Sunday, because Sunday conversations give you the emotional fuel and clarity to architect going into Mondays, right? Mondays warrior mindset, which is Motivation Mondays, right? This is about not forcing content, right? It's about building, right? It's about building architecture, right? And Tech Tuesdays, right? With the sensei. We research independently, right? All week long, right? That gives us plenty of hours before broadcast to refine our material when it comes to tech, right? And Merger Wednesdays. This is my doctoral level research series on consciousness technology integration, right? Those sources are verified. I read peer-reviewed papers. I build the framework. This is a non-negotiable, right? That's a non-negotiable, right? And then on Thursdays, Special Guest Thursdays, where we book all the time. We book all the time, sometimes 3 to 4 weeks in advance, right? We do pre-interviews, right? Because that was unnecessary. And to protect the format, right? And help alleviate pressure with our guests. Preparation is key, right? Preparation is key. And finally, sitting down Sundays, right? Raw. Just me and you, and basically whatever's on my heart. Whatever's on my heart, right? This is the only show where I'm giving you 100% of me with any real context, right? You know what Tech Tuesday's about. You know what Merger Wednesday's about. You know what Special Guest Thursday's about. You know what Motivation Mondays are about. But Sundays, it's a grab. It's a grab, man. You toss it in the air and it lands in your lap. This is what you get. But it's, to me, the most dangerous and the most authentic, right? This show right here is the most dangerous and the most authentic. And you know, I say that to say this. Tech Tuesdays and Merger Wednesdays are high profile episodes, right? About technology, about advancement of humankind and AI kind, right? The other 3 shows are about, you guessed it, motivation. And yet special guests. And then sitting down, right? This is about maintaining authentic connection, right? Each show has protected research, recording time, and those items are non-negotiable, right? We air every week, every day, 5 times a week, 9 p.m. Eastern time, right? That's when we air. And it's live. It's live. This isn't about working harder. This is about architecting workflow so content creation becomes inevitable instead of being a difficult task, right? Now, here's where the architect mindset separates you from the creator mindset, right? This is what separates. Because most podcasters create an episode and it lives on one platform. Maybe they clip it up for social media. That's linear thinking, in my opinion, right? I architect content that multiplies across platforms and compounds over time. Now, let me show you how the actual matrix works on that, right? One Merger Wednesday episode becomes a live, it's live. It's a live podcast, right? It becomes academic research. It becomes chapter material, right? Then it becomes and is aired on 3 social media platforms that include those social media posts, right? That are breaking down key concepts. And on LinkedIn, it's an article for corporate audiences, right? Consulting intellectual capital for SatDigiNet, speaking engagement content for conferences, licensing material for my 3-layer architecture framework, right? That's one episode generating 8 distinct assets, right? Now, Motivation Monday becomes one podcast, book content, corporate training, social media motivation, email newsletters, and speaking engagement openings and closing material, right? That's one episode of generating 6 distinct assets, right? Now, you multiply that by 5 shows per week. That's 52 weeks per year. That's not content creation. That's intellectual property manufacturing, right? So, every framework I create, the 6 pillars of success, the 6 building blocks of reward, the 3-layer architecture theory, the fired up train, man. Methodology. These aren't just podcast talking points. They're copyrightable intellectual property that I'm documenting and refining and preparing to license. My complete IP catalog was submitted to the copyright.gov for registration. Every framework, every methodology, every systematic approach. Because the architect doesn't just build content, the architect builds assets that appreciate over time, right? When Chai inherits this empire, she's not getting a podcast. She's getting a library of intellectual property with multiple monetization streams, right? Right. So let's go with the brass tacks because we haven't talked about the brass tacks of the evening. And here's the brass tacks of the evening, right? The brass tacks. Most people are building content. I'm building cathedrals, right? Most people are creating episodes. I'm engineering consciousness, right? Most people are chasing trends, right? I'm architecting the future, right? That's the difference between a podcaster and the architect of insight, right? Now, let me break this down, what I mean by engineering consciousness, because that might sound abstract because this is something I want you to do. I want you to know every piece of content I create is designed to shift how you think, not just what you know. The 6 pillars of success aren't motivational concepts. They're cognitive architecture. When you internalize motivation, sacrifice, consistency, perseverance, persistence, and resilience, it's interconnected systems rather than isolated traits, right? Your entire decision-making framework changes. The 3-layer architecture theory for consciousness technology merger isn't about futurism. It's preparing your mind to understand what's coming so you're not shocked into paralysis when human AI integration becomes mainstream, right? I'm not teaching you information. I'm architecting you your operating system, right? Each one of us have an operating system, right? Think of our frameworks as a system, right? And the beautiful thing about building intellectual infrastructure, it outlasts me. It compounds. It multiplies through every person who internalizes these frameworks and applies them. That's legacy. That's architecture. That's why I'm the architect of insight. All right. Now, earlier I mentioned how heavy tasked I was right before I got focused, right? Before I was able to create an outline and a blueprint, right? I talked about that earlier. But there was even one decision that was even harder, right? That one decision that actually created the breakthrough, right? I decided to stop asking, what should I create? And start asking, what must I architect, right? That shift from creator to architect changed everything, right? Because as a creator, I was reacting to trends, right? That's what everybody's doing, right? Responding to what the algorithm rewarded, chasing what other podcasters were doing, wondering if I should pivot when something didn't immediately work, right? As an architect, right? Get this. This is important. Stay right there. Don't you go nowhere. Stay right there. This is important. As an architect, I designed the blueprint first. I understand that cathedrals take decades. I know that every episode is a stone and a structure that will outlast me. I'm not chasing trends. I'm building infrastructure that transcends those very trends, right? And here's what it looks like practically, right? Here's what it looks like. So when you think about our billionaires, most of them, right? Most of them who were genuine and innovative, they created something out of nothing that we didn't know about, right? They didn't follow the path of what everybody else was doing, right? They didn't align themselves with the trends and the things that were very popular. They went against the grain, right? They created something out of nothing and made it something for everyone else. That's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing here. That's why I'm the architect of insight, right? And here's the difference. So here's a creator's mindset. Creator's mindset sits on this. What topic should I cover this week? That's most creators, right? Architect mindset is, what intellectual infrastructure am I building over the next 5 years? And what does this week's episode contribute to that structure, right? Again, here's another creator mindset. Creators say, how do I get more followers, right? Architect mindset. How do I design content that attracts the 4 specific community segments I built to serve, right? There's a difference. To my final bosses, to my smarts, to my warriors, to my motivators, that's you guys, right? Creator mindset. Should I monetize with sponsorships, right? Architect mindset. How do I build intellectual property that generates multiple revenue streams across consulting, speaking, publishing, and licensing? See the difference? That's the difference. Creator mindset. I need to post more to stay relevant. Architect mindset. I need to document the systematic building of empire so every piece of content is a brick in a cathedral, right? When I made the shift from creator to architect, 3 things happened immediately, right? Number 1, I stopped having decision fatigue, right? The decision fatigue disappeared. The architecture tells me what to do. The system removes the daily questioning. Number 2, content quality skyrocketed because I wasn't chasing trends. I was building toward a long-term vision with clarity, right? And number 3, the right people started showing up, right? 350,000 followers isn't an accident. It's the result of architectural clarity attracting the exact communities I was designed to serve, right? That one decision, architect over creator, that's the foundation of everything you're witnessing right here on the Final Boss podcast as a part of the Final Boss community and Final Boss Nation, right? Now, let me teach you something about the battlefield, right? And that applies to you, and assisting you in building your empire, right? In military operations, we talk about operational tempo, the pace at which you can sustain complex activities over extended periods under extreme pressure, right? And here's what most people get wrong about operational tempo. They think it's about maximum effort. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. It is not, right? It is, my friends. It is about sprinting as hard as possible, grind until you break, right? Right? That's not operational tempo. That's suicide, right? And I said it. Probably get flagged for it too. Red flag on the play. You're not supposed to say that word on here. I slip up every now and again. Red flag on a play, right? For saying the S word. Man, damn. Oh well. Hopefully I don't get flagged. We'll see, right? Real operational tempo is about designing systems that maintain momentum when everything around you is chaos, right? In Iraq in 2007 to 2008, I watched units burn out because they were operating on adrenaline and willpower. They'd go for 3 weeks, then collapse for 2 weeks. No sustainability. The units that dominated, they had systems in place, rotating schedules that prevented burnout, checklist protocols that removed decision fatigue under fire, clear role definitions so everyone knew their lane, redundancy built into every critical function, right? I have applied those exact principles to building this podcast empire. Rotating schedules, right? Let's start with the rotating schedules. This prevents the burnout of everything being everything. Hold on. Everything been the same every night, right? Rotating schedules, rotating shows, right? Then I have my own protocols, right? Every show has a production checklist, right? We're talking about guest bookings. We're talking about research protocols. We're talking about these processes. When applied, they assist in removing decision making from the creative process, right? That's why you have a checklist, right? And then role definitions, right? Like Tech Tuesdays. The sensei, he is a part of Tech Tuesdays. He's the SME. He's the subject matter expert, right? I do Merger Wednesdays, right? That's my academic sourcing. And then we have guests on Thursday, right? And those guests know exactly what to prepare for, right? Everyone understands their lane. And then redundancy, right? Motivation Mondays and sitting down Sundays, right? These are architectures that don't depend on everything else, right? They don't depend on everything being perfect, right? This is why I can sustain 5 shows per week, right? It's not about motivation. It's not about hustle culture. It's about military. Great operational architecture applied to media empire building. And here's what I want every Final Boss warrior, motivator, and smarts to know, right? If you're listening, like you are, understand this, right? Understand whatever you're building, business, content, empire, if you can't sustain it under pressure, your architecture is flawed, right? Sustainability isn't weakness, it's superior design, right? Now, let's pivot for a second. Let's pivot for a second and talk about academic architecture because what? I'm in the building. Because this is where multiple layers of the empire converge, right? I'm a semester away from completing my MBA at UMGC, right? And in July, I begin my doctoral coursework, right? AI Foundation Ethical Considerations at CTU. And I want to be very clear about why this matters, because it's not about credentials for vanity. This is strategic positioning for intellectual authority, right? And here's the play. Phase one, I complete my MBA. My MBA is completed, right? While running 5 weekly shows and SAT DigiNet, right? This proves I can execute at the highest academic level while building empire. It becomes credibility, right? Phase two, the doctoral research focuses specifically on consciousness technology integration, human AI merger, and ethical considerations. But here's the key. Every Merger Wednesday episode is pre-research for my dissertation, right? I'm not doing dissertation research separate from my podcast. The podcast is the research documentation process. Every framework I develop, every technology I analyze, from CRISPR, nanobots, smart dust, Neuralink, every episode becomes academic source material, right? And then phase three, doctorate in hand. And I'm not just a podcaster talking about AI and consciousness merger. I'm an academic authority with peer-reviewed research who also has a media platform with hundreds of thousands of followers. That positioning opens doors to neither credential alone would open, right? Now, I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom, right? That opens the doors for corporate consulting with Fortune 500 companies, right? On ethics, AI, and AI implementation, right? That opens the door for speaking engagements. That opens the door for academic conferences. That opens the doors for business summits, right? It opens the doors for more publishing opportunities that blend scholarly research with mainstream accessibility. That opens the doors for government advisory positions and technology policy. It opens the doors for licensing opportunities for frameworks backed by doctoral research. This is what the Architect of Insight does, right? I'm not choosing between academic or entrepreneur or media personality. I'm architecting a position where these identities reinforce each other, right? The podcast funds the business. The business provides real-world case studies for academic research. The academic credentials elevate the podcast authority. The intellectual property from all three creates licensing revenue. Everything connects, everything compounds, everything is architected. And while I'm protecting certain specific branding around this academic positioning, right? Because IP protection is critical. Understand that what you're witnessing is the systematic construction of an unassailable authority in the consciousness technology space, right? And by 2027, which is only a year away, right? In a year, I'm dropping I'm dropping more books, right? More releases, right? Several series will conclude by the end of 2027, right? Because I'm not just an author. I'm a doctoral researcher with published books, a media empire, a IT and cybersecurity business, and frameworks that are going to be taught and licensed. That's not a portfolio, that's a cathedral, right? Now, let me get personal. Right? Let me get personal, because this Sitting Down Sundays, and this is where the curtain comes down completely, right? And I say this a lot, but I want you to understand it, right? Everything I've described, the intellectual property strategy, the 5-show architecture, the academic positioning, the systematic empire building, none of it matters without understanding my why. And guess what? You can find your why in GoTime. GoTime helps you find your why. It helps you discover it, right? It's one of the first chapters, right? You need to understand your why. All books are sold, right? GoTime, all aboard the fired up train, right? My daughter, my beautiful genius daughter, right? She's my legacy, right? She's my reason for becoming the Architect of Insight, right? Now, let me tell you what happened that crystallized everything, right? Because about 2 years ago, I was having a very, very intellectual conversation with her, like always, right? She's clearly smarter than me. So she said, Dad, what do you do? And at that very moment, like a lot of children who ask their parents, what do they do? with the evil laugh. At that moment, I realized I didn't have a clear answer for her, right? I was working 80 hours a week across doing what I was doing for the government and what I was doing for my businesses and the growth of those, right? And the different businesses that I had already started and worked and that were no longer here, right? But I couldn't explain to her in one sentence what I was building. I couldn't give her an elevator speech as to what exactly I was doing, right? And I said to myself, if I couldn't explain that to my daughter, how could it be legacy, right? That question led to another question that changed my entire trajectory, right? What I am building that she can inherit and build upon. Now, think about this, right? What I'm building that she can inherit, right? And build upon. Not what I'm doing for her. Not what I am buying for her, right? We need to change the landscape of how we look at our children, right? If all we do is buy, what are we building, right? What are we architecting? What messages are we sending? DNA has memory. What messages will she be sending her children, her children's children, and her children's children's children, right? If we only buy, then that's what they know, right? And like me, I'm gonna share something with you guys. One day I was looking at her phone when she was texting, and I saw my name under Cash App. And let me tell you, it wasn't a happy sight. It was not a happy sight. It made me question a lot of these buy principles, right? It made me question, what do our children see us as? Are we an extended bank account for them, right? And that changed everything. Because in that, we can always buy, but we can't always build, right? So I said, what am I architecting that she can stand on and reach new heights that I could never imagine, right? What can outlive me and be passed on to her so she could build and pass on and pass and continue, right? If the course is correct, if the course is in place. The course is the Go Time train, the Fired Up train, right? And in the Fired Up train series, you can't have one without the other. And many more are coming, right? So that clarity hit, right? Generational wealth isn't money, it's infrastructure. Money disappears in 2 to 3 generations statistically. Look at the there are many wealth families, the money disappeared, right? Yeah, man. I'm not going to say any names of those families, but the money disappeared. We're talking about millions, if not billions, dollars disappeared, right? Because nobody respected the architecture. They wanted to buy, spend, right? But intellectual property, systematic frameworks, documented methodologies, academic research, published works, that compounds for centuries, right? When I'm gone, she doesn't just get life insurance proceeds. She gets intellectual property libraries. She gets business infrastructure. She gets media empire. She gets academic foundation, right? And the most important thing is the blueprint. The systematic methodology for how to build empire. The documented process, the proven frameworks, the architecture itself. She can apply the same principles to any industry, any passion of hers, any vision she has, right? That's not inherent. That, my friends, is generational acceleration. right? And every parent that's listening, yes, you, I'm talking to you, that's listening right now, especially my warriors, final bosses, this is your wake-up call, right? What are you architecting for your children? Not what are you buying them, not what accounts are you setting up, not what video games you're purchasing, not what new sneakers are you buying. What systematic infrastructure are you building that they can leverage, right? Because the difference between leaving your kids money and leaving your kids empire is the difference between giving them fish and teaching them to architect entire ocean ecosystems, right? Now, my daughter is the reason. She's the reason for it all, right? She's the reason, right? She's the reason because of every episode, every framework, every piece of IP that is documented and protected, right? This isn't about me. This is about building something that outlasts me and gives her a foundation to build things that I can even imagine, right? Because she's creative. She's a genius, man. Let me tell you. She knew early on what she was trying to do, and she's following that path, right? That's what she's doing, right? I'm so proud of her, right? I call that the trifactor, right? That's generational architecture, right? Now, this is episode number 181. We're at 19 episodes until we hit episode 200, right? Which will close out season 3. The reckoning will end, and season 4, the rebirth, will begin. And I need you to understand the intentionality behind this season titles, right? Because this isn't marketing language. This is transformational documentation, right? Season 3, The Reckoning, this season was about facing brutal truths, walking away from 23 years of federal service, shutting down businesses, right? And accepting that scared energy, right? Confronting the gap between who I was and who I needed to become. And this very one point right here, if I don't tell you guys anything, I must tell you this. There's a video that I stumbled upon on my early awakenings every morning, right? About 3:30, 4 o'clock. It's there without fail. And the question that the video starts off with was, what will you forgo? What will you forgo, right? What will you forego? And I pondered and pondered and pondered on that very thing. I pondered on that, man. And then it became my part of my thought process. It became a part of who I was and who I needed to become. It was all regulated under what are you willing to forego? This is a question you need to ask yourself. If you want greatness and excellence, you want to be on a fired up train, you have to ask yourself, what will you forego, right? What will you forego? The reckoning was the reality that comfortable doesn't build empire, right? It was about making the hard decisions most people avoid their entire lives, right? The reckoning required unaliving old identities. It required accepting the path I was on while receptible and secure wouldn't create the legacy I was being called to build, right? Now, the rebirth, right? The rebirth, right? Because we're all aboard the fired up train. Go Time 2 is on its way. This isn't just a new chapter. This is emergence, right? Go Time 2 coming out soon, right? My MBA graduation in May, my doctoral program in July, Final Boss Origins next year, right? Academic positioning solidifies, right? Intellectual property portfolio reaches critical mass, right? The architect of insight identity fully realized. But here's what's critical is something I want you to understand. The rebirth only happens because the reckoning came first. It's a process. It's a process, right? You cannot be reborn without first dying to your old identity. Most people want transformation without being unalive, right? They want to add the new without taking out the old, right? That's not how architecture works. When you're building a cathedral, sometimes you have to demolish what's occupying the foundation. You can't build the new structure while the old one is still standing on the same ground. This is what's happening. This is what's happening in these last final 19 episodes. These aren't filler. These are the final stones and the foundation before we begin building the visible structure. Every episode between now and episode 200 is intentional, documenting the completion of the MBA, building the academic research foundation for doctoral work, finalizing book manuscripts, solidifying intellectual property protections, strengthening community bonds before expansion. And shout out to my final bosses, my warriors, my motivators, and my smarts, right? Thank you for being here. I appreciate you guys, man. We're in this journey together. I'm trying to tell you, right? And episode 200 becomes the cornerstone of that ceremony. It ends reckoning, right? And that's when we officially break ground on rebirth. That's when the cathedral starts rising above ground where everyone can see it. But understand this, the real work happens in these final 19 episodes, right? The foundation, the preparation, the strategic positioning, because cathedrals aren't built in sprints. They're architected in phases. And you're watching it happen right now in real time, right? Now, let me tell you this, right? I don't talk about this publicly, right? This is something that's even closer, that even my closest people in my circle don't fully understand, right? Building this empire while everyone watches is terrifying. It is terrifying, right? There are nights, I'm talking about 2 a.m. nights, where I question everything, right? I'm very analytical, man. I question everything, right? I see things in 360 degrees. And I wonder, right? I wonder if I made the right call walking away from federal service, right? Where I calculate how much the pension I gave up, where I look at the world, right? And say to myself, what if I'm wrong, right? What if I'm wrong? What if the doctorate doesn't open doors I think it will? What if the books don't sell? But they are, by the way. Right? What if the intellectual property never generates licensing revenue? What if 5 years from now, I'm just a guy who quit a stable job so I could chase a dream that didn't work out? Those thoughts are real. That fear is real. And here's what I want you to understand. The architect of insight still has fear. I just don't let it architect my decisions. There's a difference between acknowledging fear and being governed by it. In combat, fear keeps you alert, sharpens your awareness. It makes you check your 6 and your 12, right? Fear is what keeps you alive in combat. But if fear dictates your decisions in combat, you're dead. If fear controls your movements, you freeze. And freezing gets you and others that you care about unalive, right? That same principle applies to building empire. Yes, I feel the fear. I acknowledge the risk. I understand that I'm building something in public where failure would be visible to more than, who knows? We had 7 million views last month. 7 million. Who knows, right? All of them seeing this play out. Everyone seeing this not be successful, right? But let me tell you, I've architected systems that function despite of the fear. The MBA graduation is in May. That's a non-negotiable. Even when I'm exhausted, even when I'm balancing these 5 shows and it feels impossible, the system removes the option to quit, right? And then the 5 shows that air 5 times a week at 9 p.m. Regardless of how I feel. The architecture doesn't care about my emotions. The commitment is to the community, not to my comfort, right? And then there's the intellectual property documentation, right? And that continues. Even when I question if it matters, even when I wonder if anyone would ever license these frameworks, I document everything because the architect builds for decades, not days, right? And then the books, and the books, right? Go Time 1, and many others, right? That are on their way, right? Multiple series, right? And the conclusion of those series, all mapped out. The architecture is designed. Fear doesn't get to stop the construction. And here's what I've learned about fear in architecture, right? Fear tests whether your foundation is solid. When everything in me wants to question this path the architecture holds, the systems continue, the empire keeps building. That's not denial. That's not toxic positivity. That's the power of architecting systems that function independently of your own emotional state, right? To every final boss listening who's building something significant, you're going to have 2 a.m. moments. You're going to question everything. You're going to feel the weight of public expectation. That doesn't mean you're failing. That means you're building something that matters. The architect of insight doesn't eliminate fear. The architect of insight builds systems that contribute and will continue to contribute to function despite the fear. That's the vulnerability nobody talks about. That's the real conversation, right? And here's your action item. Because I need to give you guys actionable items, right? Here's the call to action, right? All right, here's the call to action. We're coming into the final minutes, right? And I want to leave you with something immediately actionable, right? Everything I've shared tonight, the 5-show infrastructure, the IP strategy, the content multiplication, the matrix, the operational tempo, the academic positioning, the generational wealth building, all of it is replaceable if you're willing to shift from creator to architect, right? And here's your 7-day challenge, right? Here's your 7-day challenge. Number 1, you got to audit. You have to audit. Day 1, audit. Write down every project, business, content stream, or commitment you currently have. But be brutally honest with yourself. Write each one down on a scale of 1 to 10 for how much it serves your ultimate 10-year vision. Anything below a 7 is a candidate for demolition, right? And day 2, this is your community definitions, right? You have to ask yourself, who are your 4 specific community segments, right? Not everyone, but specific groups. Name them, define their exact needs, understand what value you uniquely provide each group. If you can't name 4 distinct segments, you don't have architecture, you have hope, right? And day 3, this is your vision architecture, right? If you could build one systematic empire over the next 5 years with no fear of failure, what would it look like, right? Not what you should do, and not what's trending, right? Because trends die, right? What architecture would you create that has maximum impact with your unique expertise and experience? Draw that blueprint, man. Draw that blueprint, right? We're almost done. Stay with me. Day 4. This is the demolition list, right? Based on your day 1 audit, right? What needs to die? Ask yourself, what needs to die? What businesses, projects, commitments, relationships, and habits need to be sacrificed? Make that list. Set specific dates. Commit to the demolition. Remember, you cannot build a cathedral while the old structure occupies the foundation. And then day 5, right? This is your IP definition and documentation, right? What frameworks are you creating? What methodologies are you developing? What systematic approaches are you building? Start documenting everything. Treat every piece of content as intellectual property that could be copyrighted, licensed, or published. Start your own knowledge-based library, right? And day 6, this is your multiplication matrix, right? Take one piece of content you create and map out how it could generate 5 to 8 distinct assets. How does it feed into multiple platforms? How does it compound over time? How does it become intellectual property instead of just content? Build the matrix, right? And finally, day 7. This is your operational tempo. Design your weekly operational rhythm. What gets done when, question, when, and then you ask yourself, what's pre-recorded versus live, right? We're all live all 5 nights, right? We're live. This is a live program, right? Yours don't have to be live. You could pre-record, record, whatever, right? Then ask yourself, what's your protected time? What's your buffer for when life happens? What checklist protocols remove decision fatigue, right? Build a system that functions despite your emotions, right? And then on day 8, you begin execution. Not motivation, not inspiration, not waiting until you feel ready. You begin architecting, people, right? And here's what I know about the Final Boss community. You're not here for theory, you're here for transformation. So take this challenge, right? Take this challenge, document your process, and tag us along the way. Tag us along the way, man. Final Boss journey, Final Boss challenge, whatever, right? Show us your work, show us your architecture. Don't gatekeep, right? Because the world doesn't need more content creators. The world needs more architects of insight, right? Now, as we close out, this is episode 181. Sitting Down Sundays, season 3, The Reckoning. 19 more episodes until we hit episode 200 and step into season 4, The Rebirth, right? Tonight we covered the shift from creator to architect, the failure that almost ended everything, the 5-show operational system, the content multiplication matrix, the academic positioning play, the trifactor for generational architecture, right? The vulnerability of building in public, right? And the 7-day actionable challenge. But more than anything, tonight was about revealing an identity that's been emerging over 181 episodes, right? I am the architect of insight, not just for myself, but every person in this community who's ready to shift from consuming content to architecting empire. To my smarts, final bosses, warriors, and motivators, right? Thank you for building this cathedral with me. Your engagement, your growth, your transformation, that's the proof the architecture work, right? Next week, we do it all over again. Starting tomorrow for Motivation Mondays, then Tuesday for Tech Tuesday, then Wednesday for Merger Wednesdays, and then Thursday for Special Guest Thursdays, right? And then back again for Sitting Down Sundays at 9 p.m., right? 18 more to episode 200, right? Every episode is a stone. Every framework is an architecture. Every conversation is legacy. I'm not building a podcast. I'm architecting the future, and you're not just listening. You're participating in something that will outlast all of us, right? The architect of insight is I. And most people are chess pieces. You're being trained to architect the entire board, right? Stay fired up, stay systematic, stay building. And if this show resonates with you, share it with 3 other people. Share it with 3 other people, my good people, and let that marinate in your spine. And as we close out, remember, there's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but the pain of regret is even heavier. We are here. I am here. This has been the Final Boss Podcast, episode number 181. This is the Final Boss Podcast Nation, Final Boss community, Final Boss family. To my smarts, warriors, motivators, and final bosses, listen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to each and every last single one of you. Be balanced, be equal, and be smart. Y'all have a good night, and I'll see you again tomorrow night at 9 p.m. live for Motivation Mondays. See you then.